The silent observers. The morning tide rolled gently across the crystalline beaches of Aquatica Prime, its waters glowing with the soft blue bioluminescence that made this world famous throughout the galaxy. Dr. Kira Valdris stood on the observation platform of Deep Station 7, watching her research team work in the crystal caves below the ocean's surface. The Valdari had built their entire civilization around understanding the mysteries of the deep, and this planet offered secrets that could benefit the entire galaxy. Kira was young for a lead researcher, barely 30 cycles old, but her passion for marine biology had earned her the respect of scientists across known space. Her people, the Valdari, were natural swimmers with gills that allowed them to work underwater for hours. Their sleek blue-green skin and large dark eyes were perfectly adapted for the ocean depths they called home. The research station housed nearly 300 scientists and their families, all dedicated to studying the rare Aquatica crystals that grew in the planet's deepest trenches. These crystals could store vast amounts of energy and were essential for powering the galaxy's most advanced technologies. The work was peaceful, exactly what the Valdari valued most after generations of scientific discovery. Dr. Thane Corrales, Kira's research partner, swam up to the platform carrying a collection container filled with glowing crystal samples. "The yield from Trench 12 is beyond our expectations," he said, his voice carrying the musical quality that all Valdari possessed. "These formations could power a star freighter for decades." Kira nodded, examining the samples through the container's transparent walls. Her people had no military, no weapons beyond basic security tools. The galaxy knew them as researchers and healers, not fighters. This peaceful reputation had served them well, earning friendship and protection from most civilized species. The alarm changed everything. A deep, resonating tone echoed through the station as the long-range sensors detected incoming vessels. Kira rushed to the command center, Thane close behind her. The technician at the sensor station, a nervous young male named Jorik, stared at his screen with wide, terrified eyes. "Director Kira," Jorik said, his voice shaking. 47 ships, all military class, coming straight for us. They're not responding to our identification requests." Kira felt her heart sink as she looked at the display. The ships were still hours away, but their design was unmistakable. Angular hulls covered in weapon ports, engines that burned with the cold fire of conquest. These were Nexari warships. Every civilized species in the galaxy knew about the Nexari. They were conquerors, slavers, destroyers of peaceful worlds. They took what they wanted and left nothing but devastation behind. Entire colonies had vanished when the Nexari came calling, their populations either enslaved or eliminated. "How long do we have?" Kira asked, though she already knew the answer wouldn't be enough. 8 hours, maybe 9 if they slow down too. "Scan the system," Jorik replied, his hands trembling as he worked the controls. Kira closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Her people had no warships, no military training, no way to fight back against 47 Nexari battlecruisers. Their only hope was help from outside. But who would come to aid a research station in the remote Aquatica system? "Send out the distress signal," she ordered. "Broadcast on all frequencies, all languages. Tell everyone what's happening here." Thane moved to the communication station and began working, his fingers flying over the controls as he composed the message that might be their only chance at survival. The signal would take time to reach other worlds, time they might not have. The message went out across the galaxy in dozens of languages. It told of a peaceful research colony under threat, of 300 innocent people about to be enslaved or killed. It begged for help, for someone, anyone, to come to their aid. The responses came quickly, but they brought no comfort. The nearby systems all sent the same message in different words. Too far away, too dangerous, not their problem. Some were honest about their fear of the Nexari. Others hid behind diplomatic language and treaty obligations. The Galactic Federation's response was the worst of all. The official message spoke of regret and non-interference protocols. They would not risk war with the Nexari over one research station. The mathematics were simple and cold. 300 lives were not worth the thousands that might die in a larger conflict. Kira read each rejection with growing despair. Her people were truly alone. The galaxy that had welcomed their research and traded for their crystals would not lift a finger to save them. As the hours passed, the Nexari fleet grew larger on their sensors. The ships were massive, built for war and intimidation. Each one carried enough firepower to level a city. Together, they could turn the entire research station into underwater rubble in minutes. The evacuation preparations were hopeless, but Kira ordered them anyway. Some of her people might survive in the deep cave systems if they were lucky. Thane organized teams to hide the most important research data and destroy anything that might be useful to the Nexari. But resistance was futile. The Valdari were scientists, not soldiers. They had no weapons, no military training, no experience with violence. When the Nexari came, they would face them as they had always faced challenges, with dignity, curiosity, and hope. Far across the galaxy, on the edge of known space, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of the stealth reconnaissance ship USS Phantom. Her ship was part of Earth's deep space monitoring program, watching the galaxy's activities from the shadows. Humanity was still new to the galactic community, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 7 years ago. Most alien species saw humans as primitive newcomers barely worth noticing. Chen was a career intelligence officer, sharp-minded and careful, with the kind of instincts that kept reconnaissance ships alive in hostile territory. She had spent her life in Earth's Navy, first fighting pirates in the outer colonies, then helping to design humanity's first interstellar vessels. The alien distress signal troubled her in ways she couldn't fully explain. Her communications officer, a young lieutenant named Marcus Torres, knocked on her cabin door and entered with decoded messages. "Ma'am, we've been monitoring the galactic networks. The Valdari are being abandoned. The Galactic Federation has officially declared non-intervention. No one is responding to their distress calls." Chen looked up from the translated message. "What do we know about these Nexari?" "Bad news all around, ma'am. They're conquerors and slavers. Intelligence says they've destroyed dozens of research colonies over the past century. They take prisoners for the slave markets and strip everything valuable from the worlds they attack." Chen stared out her cabin window at the stars beyond. The Phantom was equipped with humanity's most advanced stealth technology, able to observe without being detected, but observation was all they were supposed to do. Earth's policy was clear: watch, learn, but don't interfere. "Ma'am?" Torres asked, noticing his commander's distant expression. "Are we going to report this to Earth Command?" Chen turned back to her communications officer. "Send a priority message to Admiral Harrison at Deep Space Command. Full tactical analysis of the situation." "And Torres?" "Yes, ma'am." "Make sure they understand that 300 innocent people are about to die because the galaxy is too afraid to act." As Torres left to send the message, Chen remained at her window, watching the distant stars. The Phantom was alone out here, too far from Earth to make a difference, but someone needed to witness what was about to happen. Someone needed to remember. The Nexari fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a swarm of metal predators. 47 warships appeared in the outer system of Aquatica Prime, their dark hulls seeming to absorb the light of the distant star. Each vessel was a monument to destruction, covered in weapon ports and scarred by countless battles. Admiral Vex Morden stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Worldbreaker, watching the blue-green planet grow larger on his screens. He was a massive creature even by Nexari standards, with thick gray scales covering his powerful frame. His yellow eyes gleamed with anticipation as he studied the defenseless world ahead. "Scan the planet," he ordered his crew. "I want to know everything about this little research station." The sensor operator worked quickly at his station. "Admiral, the scans show a single facility on the northern continent. Approximately 300 life forms, all Valdari. No military installations detected, no defensive weapons." Morden smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. This would be easy work. The Valdari were known throughout the galaxy as peaceful researchers, completely harmless. Their colonies were like treasure chests waiting to be opened. "Any response to our arrival?" he asked. "They are broadcasting surrender offers and pleas for mercy. The communications officer reported. Standard behavior for their species, Admiral. Ignore them, Morden said. Begin the assault. I want this finished quickly so we can harvest their crystals and move on to the next target. The Nexari fleet moved toward the planet in perfect formation. Each ship knew its role in the coming attack. Some would bombard the facility from orbit while others landed troops to secure prisoners and valuable materials. It was a routine they had performed hundreds of times before. On the planet's surface, Kira watched the approaching ships with growing despair. The station's emergency shelters could protect some of her people from orbital bombardment, but they couldn't hide forever. The Nexari were known for their patience when hunting valuable prey. How many made it to the underwater caves? She asked Thane, who was coordinating the evacuation. About 70 people are in the deep cave systems, he replied, his normally calm voice tight with stress. The rest are in the main shelters. We have enough supplies to last maybe a week if we're careful. Kira nodded grimly. The Nexari wouldn't need a week to find them. The raiders had sensors that could detect life signs through solid rock. The caves would buy them time, nothing more. The first energy beams struck the research station's outer buildings 30 minutes later. The Nexari ships fired with surgical precision, destroying power stations and communication arrays while leaving the main structures intact. They wanted prisoners alive and infrastructure undamaged for easy exploitation. Thane crouched beside Kira as explosions shook their underwater command center. The main laboratory is gone, he reported, reading from a damaged tablet. The crystal storage areas are flooded. They're being very careful not to damage the harvesting equipment. Of course they are, Kira said bitterly. They want to continue our work for their own profit. The bombardment lasted for 3 hours. When it ended, the Nexari landing ships descended like hungry predators. Morden personally led the first wave of troops, eager to inspect his new acquisition. His soldiers spread out across the damaged facility, using portable scanners to hunt for hidden survivors. The main shelter held out for 40 minutes before the Nexari blasted through its reinforced doors. Kira and most of her people were inside, having chosen to surrender rather than watch their families suffer. The Nexari herded them into the facility's main courtyard, where portable energy barriers created an improvised prison. Morden walked among the captured Valdari like a merchant inspecting goods. The adults would bring excellent prices in the slave markets of the Outer Rim. The children could be trained for specific purposes. The elderly scientists might have valuable knowledge before they outlived their usefulness. Process them quickly, he told his subordinates. I want to be off this world before anyone decides to investigate. Not all the Valdari had been captured. Thane and a handful of others had made it to the deep cave systems before the landing ships arrived. They huddled in the darkness, listening to the sounds of destruction above. Thane had managed to save a small emergency transmitter, and he continued broadcasting distress signals even though he knew it was hopeless. Is anyone listening? He whispered into the device. This is Dr. Thane Corrales of the Aquatica Prime Research Station. The Nexari have taken our people. They are loading them onto ships for transport to the slave markets. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need help. The response was always the same. Static, silence, and the sound of his own desperation echoing in the flooded caves. Meanwhile, billions of kilometers away, Lieutenant Commander Chen watched the attack unfold on her ship's long-range sensors. The USS Phantom's stealth systems kept them hidden, but Chen felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with enemy detection. Ma'am, Torres said quietly, Earth Command is responding to our report. Chen took the decoded message and read it, quickly. The response was exactly what she had expected and everything she had hoped it wouldn't be. Earth Command acknowledged the situation, but confirmed standing orders. Observe and report only. Humanity was not yet ready to challenge the established powers of the galaxy. But as Chen watched the Nexari ship systematically destroy the research station and load prisoners into their cargo bays, she made a decision that would change everything. She opened a secure channel to Earth's Deep Space Command and sent a message that violated every protocol in the book. This is Lieutenant Commander Chen aboard the USS Phantom. I am transmitting full tactical data on the Nexari attack on Aquatica Prime. 300 innocent civilians are being enslaved while the galaxy watches. Someone needs to do something about this. Someone needs to show these predators that there are still people willing to fight for what's right. The message would take hours to reach Earth, but Chen knew that somewhere in the vast bureaucracy of Earth's military, there were people who would understand, people who would act. As the Nexari fleet prepared to leave Aquatica Prime with their prisoners and stolen crystals, none of them noticed the small stealth ship watching from the outer system. None of them knew that their actions had been recorded, analyzed, and transmitted to a species they had never encountered. None of them knew that they had just awakened something in the darkness between the stars. Admiral Morden stood on his bridge, satisfied with the day's work. The Valdari crystals would fetch excellent prices, and the prisoners would be valuable additions to the slave markets. It had been a perfect operation. Quick, efficient, and profitable. He had no way of knowing that. In the deep caves of Aquatica Prime, Dr. Thane Corrales was still broadcasting his desperate pleas for help. He had no way of knowing that those pleas were being heard by creatures he had never encountered, beings from a small blue world that called itself Earth. The Nexari fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying their prizes toward the slave markets of the Outer Rim. Behind them, Aquatica Prime's oceans began to reclaim the ruins of the research station, its bioluminescent waters glowing like tears in the darkness. But in the shadows at the edge of the system, the USS Phantom remained, its crew bearing witness to an atrocity that would not be forgotten. Chen looked out at the stars and made a silent promise to the people who had died today. Someone would remember, someone would act, and someone would make the Nexari pay for what they had done. The galaxy had abandoned the Valdari, but they had not been forgotten. In the depths of space, humanity was watching, learning, and preparing to introduce itself to the galaxy in a way that no one would ever forget. When shadows strike, the message from Lieutenant Commander Chen reached Earth's Deep Space Command in the early hours of what would become known as Decision Day. Admiral James Harrison sat in his office at Luna Command, reading the decoded transmission for the third time. The tactical data was clear. The Nexari had struck again, and this time humanity had witnessed every moment of their brutal efficiency. Harrison was a veteran of Earth's colonial wars, gray-haired and weathered by decades of difficult decisions. He had helped design humanity's expansion into the galaxy, always cautious, always careful not to provoke the established powers. But as he read Chen's report, something cold settled in his chest. His aide, Captain Rebecca Martinez, knocked and entered with additional intelligence reports. "Sir, we've analyzed the Nexari fleet composition. 47 ships including 12 heavy cruisers and 3 battleships. Standard slavers formation, designed for intimidation and quick strikes." Harrison looked up from the message. "What's the current status of Project Shadow?" Martinez hesitated. "Sir, the 3 stealth Dreadnoughts completed their trials last month. The shadow drive technology is operational, but it's never been tested in actual combat conditions. Admiral Foster has certified them ready for deployment, but we've never used them against an enemy that could fight back," Harrison finished. He stood and walked to the massive window overlooking Earth's lunar shipyards. 3 enormous shapes floated in the construction bays, their hulls absorbing light like holes in space itself. The USS Wraith, USS Spectre, and USS Phantom's Edge were humanity's most advanced warships, incorporating technology that no other species in the galaxy possessed. The shadow drives allowed them to move undetected through space, while their weapon systems combined human engineering with principles that pushed the boundaries of known physics. "Sir," Martinez said carefully, "the Galactic Federation has made it clear that interference in Nexari operations could result in economic sanctions against Earth. The political ramifications." 300 innocent people were enslaved today, Harrison interrupted. Scientists, researchers, families, and the galaxy's response was to look the other way because it was politically convenient. Harrison turned back to his aide. "Get me Admiral Foster, Captain Reynolds, and Captain Kim. Tell them to prepare their ships for immediate deployment. Authorization code Alpha 77. Martinez's eyes widened. Sir, that's a combat authorization. Are you sure about this? Harrison looked once more at the ships in the yard. Captain, there comes a time when doing what's right matters more than doing what's safe. Send the order. Across the lunar facility, alarms began to sound as the Shadow fleet received its first combat mission. On the USS Wraith, Admiral Elizabeth Foster reviewed the tactical data with grim satisfaction. She was humanity's most experienced deep space commander, having led the exploration fleets that first made contact with alien civilizations. All stations, prepare for shadow drive activation, she announced to her crew. This is not a drill. We are about to engage hostile forces in defense of innocent civilians. The Wraith's shadow drive was a marvel of human engineering. Unlike the hyperdrives used by other species, the shadow drive folded space around the ship, allowing it to move through what humans called the deep dark, a layer of reality that existed between normal space and hyperspace. Ships using shadow drives were completely undetectable by conventional sensors. Captain David Reynolds stood on the bridge of the USS Spectre, watching his crew prepare for humanity's first major military operation beyond the solar system. His ship was the newest of the 3 Dreadnoughts, equipped with experimental weapons that had never been tested in real combat. Navigation. Plot a course for the Aquatica system, he ordered. Engineering. Bring the shadow drive to full power. Weapons. Load all torpedo tubes and charge the lance batteries. On the USS Phantom's Edge, Captain Lisa Kim was conducting final systems checks. Her ship was the smallest of the 3 Dreadnoughts, but the fastest, designed for reconnaissance and rapid strike missions. Communications, send a coded message to the USS Phantom, she ordered. Tell Commander Chen that help is on the way, and patch me through to the fleet channel. The 3 captains coordinated their approach as the Shadow Fleet prepared to depart Earth's vicinity. Their destination was the Nexari slave route, a well-traveled path through the galaxy's outer regions, where the raiders transported their human cargo. All ships, this is Admiral Foster, came the transmission. Our mission is simple. Rescue the Valdari prisoners and neutralize the Nexari threat. Intelligence suggests the enemy fleet is following their standard route to the Vega Terminus slave markets. We'll intercept them at the Kronos Junction. The Shadow Fleet activated their drives simultaneously, vanishing from normal space in a distortion of light and energy. They moved through the deep dark like ghosts, covering vast distances in hours instead of days. Meanwhile, the Nexari fleet was making good time toward their destination. Admiral Morden stood in his private quarters, examining the Valdari crystals his troops had harvested. The energy patterns were beautiful, he had to admit, though beauty was secondary to profit. His communications officer's voice crackled over the intercom. Admiral, we're receiving standard traffic control signals from the Kronos Junction. All shipping lanes are clear for our passage. Excellent, Morden replied. Maintain formation and prepare for the jump to Vega Terminus. I want those prisoners processed and sold before any of the other raiders hear about this cargo. In the cargo holds of the Nexari ships, the captured Valdari huddled in cramped cells, their hope fading with each passing hour. Dr. Kira Valdris sat with her arms around 2 young researchers trying to offer comfort she didn't feel. Director, whispered Dr. Jorik, do you think anyone received our distress signals? Kira closed her eyes. The galaxy heard us, she said quietly. But hearing and acting are different things. We have to accept that we're on our own now. But, even as she spoke those words, something was moving through the deep dark toward their position. 3 shadows in space, carrying the hopes of a species that had never forgotten what it meant to fight for the innocent. The Kronos Junction was a busy crossroads of interstellar trade, where dozens of shipping lanes converged in a single star system. Merchant vessels, cargo haulers, and the occasional patrol ship moved through the area in predictable patterns. It was the perfect place for an ambush. The Nexari fleet dropped out of hyperspace exactly on schedule, their formation tight and professional. Admiral Morden's ships moved through the junction like they owned it, which in many ways they did. Few species were willing to challenge Nexari vessels in open space. Traffic control. This is Admiral Morden of the Nexari expansion fleet, he transmitted, requesting priority clearance for jump to Vega Terminus. Confirmed, Admiral, came the reply from the junction's automated systems. You are cleared for departure. Safe travels. Morden smiled. The galaxy's authorities were so predictable, so afraid of conflict, that they would facilitate the transport of slaves rather than risk confrontation. It was a system that had served the Nexari well for centuries. He was about to order the jump to hyperspace when his sensor operator spoke up with confusion in his voice. Admiral, I'm detecting some unusual readings at the edge of the system. The sensors are showing nothing, but there's something wrong with the nothing. Morden frowned. Explain. Sir, it's like there are holes in space itself. 3 of them, roughly the size of large warships but completely invisible to our scanners. Before Morden could respond, reality tore open around his fleet. 3 massive shapes materialized from the deep dark, their hulls black as the void between stars. The human dreadnoughts emerged from Shadow Drive with their weapons already charging. Unknown vessels, came a transmission in perfect Nexari language. This is Admiral Foster of the Earth Defense Fleet. You are carrying illegally obtained prisoners and stolen property. Release the Valdari immediately and surrender, or face the consequences. Morden stared at the tactical display in disbelief. 3 ships against his 47. The odds were impossible, but something about the alien vessels made his scales crawl with unease. He had never seen ship designs like these, never encountered the technology that let them appear from nowhere. Earth Defense Fleet? He snarled. Never heard of it. You are outnumbered 15-1, strangers. Withdraw now and we might spare your lives. The human response was immediate and devastating. The USS Wraith opened fire first, its lance batteries sending beams of coherent energy through the Nexari formation. The beams weren't like conventional energy weapons. They seemed to cut through space itself, bypassing shields and striking hull metal directly. The lead Nexari cruiser simply came apart, its molecular structure disrupted by weapons that operated on principles the aliens didn't understand. The USS Spectre launched its torpedo spread, but these weren't conventional missiles. The human weapons moved through space like living things, adjusting their course mid-flight and striking targets with impossible precision. Each torpedo carried a warhead that created a localized space-time distortion, crushing enemy ships from the inside out. But the real shock came when the USS Phantom's Edge deployed its fighter wings. Hundreds of small craft poured from the dreadnoughts, launch bays, their pilots ready for the fight of their lives. These weren't ordinary fighters. They were equipped with miniaturized shadow drives that let them appear and disappear at will. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Martinez led Alpha Squadron in a diving attack on the Nexari formation's left flank. Her fighters moved like ghosts, materializing behind enemy ships and vanishing before return fire could reach them. This is Alpha Leader. Her voice crackled over the communication system, beginning hit-and-run attacks on their heavy cruisers. These shadow drives are incredible. They can't track us at all. Captain Rebecca Stone commanded the bomber wings, leading them in coordinated strikes against the Nexari fleet's command. Ships. Her pilots had trained for this moment their entire careers, and they moved with the precision of a symphony orchestra. Admiral Morden watched in growing horror as his carefully organized fleet began to fall apart. The human ships fought like nothing he had ever encountered. Their weapons were devastatingly effective, their tactics brutal and efficient. These creatures, whatever they were, had built their warships for one purpose: destroying enemies quickly and completely. All ships, concentrate fire on the lead human vessel, he ordered desperately. Bring down their flagship and the others. We'll retreat. 20 Nexari ships turned their weapons on the USS Wraith, pouring energy into the human dreadnoughts' defenses. For a moment, it seemed like the concentrated firepower might succeed. The Wraith's shields flared under the assault, warning lights flashing across its bridge. But then something extraordinary happened. The human ship seemed to phase out of normal space, becoming translucent and ghostly. The Nexari weapons passed through it harmlessly, their energy beams striking empty space. Shadow phase activated, Admiral Foster announced calmly. All ships execute attack pattern Delta. Show them what happens when you threaten innocent people. The 3 human dreadnoughts moved through the Nexari formation like avenging angels. Their weapons carved through enemy hulls with surgical precision, targeting specific systems rather than simply destroying everything in sight. They were rescuing prisoners, not conducting a massacre. Captain Reynolds on the USS Spectre coordinated the boarding operations. Marine Teams Alpha through Delta, prepare for hostile boarding actions. Remember, we're here to save lives, not take them. Neutralize resistance but avoid unnecessary casualties. The human Marines were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They moved through the Nexari ships with the efficiency of a special forces unit, their powered armor making them nearly unstoppable. Within minutes, they had secured the cargo holds where the Valdari prisoners were kept. Dr. Kira Valdris couldn't believe what she was seeing as human soldiers cut through the locks on her cell. The beings were bipedal like her own species, but their technology was clearly far more advanced than anything she had encountered. "Are you injured?" asked the Marine sergeant, his voice translated by a universal communication device. "We're here to get you home." "Who are you?" Kira whispered, hardly daring to believe that rescue had actually come. "We're humans," the sergeant replied, "and we heard your call for help." As the rescue operations continued, the Nexari fleet continued to disintegrate under the human assault. Admiral Morden's flagship was one of the last ships still fighting, its weapons blazing desperately at targets that seemed to exist only when they wanted to be seen. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "we've lost 32 ships. The remaining vessels are requesting permission to retreat." Morden stared at the tactical display, watching his life's work crumble around him. Decades of successful raids, hundreds of conquered worlds, thousands of slaves taken, all ending because of 3 ships from a species he had never heard of. "Signal the remaining ships," he said finally. "Full retreat. Emergency jump to hyperspace." But the humans weren't finished. As the surviving Nexari vessels prepared to flee, they found their hyperdrives mysteriously failing. The human ships had deployed some kind of interdiction field that prevented faster-than-light travel. Admiral Foster's voice echoed across the battlefield. "Admiral Morden, you are charged with crimes against sentient beings, slavery, and acts of piracy. Surrender your remaining vessels and submit to justice." For a moment, Morden considered fighting to the death. But as he looked at the wreckage of his fleet, he realized that these humans had systematically dismantled his forces without suffering a single casualty. They weren't just advanced. They were playing by rules he didn't understand. I surrender," he transmitted, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. The aftermath of the battle was swift and efficient. The surviving Nexari were taken into custody, their ships impounded as evidence of their crimes. The rescued Valdari were given medical attention and prepared for transport back to their home worlds. Dr. Kira Valdris stood on the observation deck of the USS Wraith, looking out at the stars with wonder. She had gone from prisoner to free being in a matter of hours, rescued by a species that most of the galaxy had never heard of. "Thank you," she said to Admiral Foster, who had come to check on the rescued prisoners. "My people owe you a debt we can never repay." Foster smiled, her expression kind but determined. "You don't owe us anything, Dr. Valdris. We did what anyone should do when innocent people are in danger." "But why?" Kira asked. "Your species had nothing to gain from this action. You risked war with the Nexari, economic sanctions from the Galactic Federation. Why would you do this for strangers?" Foster looked out at the stars, her eyes reflecting the light of distant suns. "Because someone has to stand up for what's right. Because the galaxy is full of predators who count on good people doing nothing. And because today we decided that we can't help isn't an acceptable answer." As the human fleet prepared to depart the Kronos Junction, word of the battle spread throughout the galaxy. The Nexari, one of the most feared raider factions in known space, had been defeated by 3 ships from a previously unknown species. The implications were staggering. In the Galactic Federation's council chambers, emergency sessions were called to discuss this new development. Some representatives called for immediate diplomatic contact with Earth. Others worried about the military implications of a species that could appear from nowhere and defeat established powers. But in the deep caves of Aquatica Prime, Dr. Thane Corrales received a message that changed everything. It was a simple transmission, broadcast in his own language. "Dr. Corrales, this is Admiral Foster of the Earth Defense Fleet. Your people are safe. The Nexari responsible for the attack on your research station have been defeated, and your colleagues are being returned home. The galaxy may have forgotten what it means to protect the innocent, but humanity remembers. Thane wept as he listened to the message, his tears mixing with the bioluminescent waters of the flooded caves. For the first time in days, he had hope. Someone had heard their call for help. Someone had acted when the entire galaxy stood by and watched. As the USS Wraith, USS Spectre, and USS Phantom's Edge jumped into hyperspace, carrying their rescued passengers toward safety, the galaxy began to understand that a new power had emerged from the darkness between stars. Humanity had announced its presence not with words or treaties, but with action. The Nexari slave routes, which had operated with impunity for centuries, suddenly became dangerous. Other raider factions found their operations disrupted by ghost ships that appeared from nowhere, freed their prisoners, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. The message was clear. There were consequences for preying on the innocent. There were people willing to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. And in the deep dark between stars, humanity was watching, waiting, and ready to act when justice called. The galaxy would never be the same. The age of the silent observer was over. The age of the protector had begun.